When my husband passed away, my world seemed to collapse into silence. We had built a life together in Denver, Colorado, filled with small traditions, laughter in the kitchen, and evenings spent watching the sunset from our porch. His sudden passing from a heart condition left a void I didn't know how to fill. I would sit for hours in the living room, staring at old photographs, replaying his voice in my head, and listening to the echoes of a life we once shared. The house, though warm and familiar, felt unbearably empty. My son Daniel was in his early 20s. He had just started his career in graphic design and was trying to balance work with his studies. He stayed with me often, but his life was just beginning, and I never wanted to hold him back with my grief. Still, I could see the worry in his eyes whenever he came home, like he feared I was slipping too far into loneliness. One rainy Saturday afternoon, I sat in the dim light of the living room with a blanket draped over my shoulders. The sound of rain tapping against the windows was both comforting and melancholy. I thought of my husband Michael, and how he used to say that rainy days were made for storytelling. But without him, the stories remained locked inside me. It was then that I heard a knock at the door. I hesitated, surprised. Daniel had told me he was working on a project at the office that day, so it wasn't him. Slowly, I got up and opened the door. Standing there was Ethan, my son's closest friend since high school. "Hi, Mrs. Reynolds," he said with a small, respectful smile. He held a bag of groceries in one hand and an umbrella in the other. "Daniel told me you weren't feeling like going out much lately, so I thought I'd stop by and check on you." For a moment, my eyes welled with tears. That simple act of kindness, someone remembering me, someone noticing, felt like sunlight breaking through gray clouds. I invited him inside, and he set the groceries on the kitchen counter. He had bought fresh bread, soup, and some of my favorite tea. "You didn't have to do this," I told him softly. "I wanted to," he replied. "You've always been like a second mom to me, and I just thought maybe you could use some company." We sat at the kitchen table as the rain continued to fall outside. Ethan told me stories about his new job, about funny things that had happened at work, and about memories he and Daniel shared from their teenage years. For the first time in months, I laughed, a genuine laugh that startled even me. That evening, he stayed for dinner. I warmed up the soup while he sliced the bread. The simple act of preparing a meal together made the house feel alive again. I realized then that grief had isolated me so much that I had forgotten what it felt like to share space with another person in a meaningful way. Over the following weeks, Ethan continued to stop by whenever Daniel couldn't. Sometimes he helped me with errands. Sometimes he fixed little things around the house that Michael would have taken care of. Other times, he simply sat with me and listened. He never pushed me to talk about my pain, but when I did, he listened with patience and kindness. One afternoon in late autumn, I was raking leaves in the backyard when I grew tired and sat down on the porch steps. The weight of missing Michael pressed heavily on me, and I buried my face in my hands. Suddenly, I felt a gentle pat on my shoulder. Ethan had arrived without me noticing. "You don't have to carry this alone," he said softly. I looked at him, tears streaming down my face, and realized that this young man was teaching me something profound, that healing doesn't always come in grand gestures, but in small acts of presence. As time went on, our home regained its warmth. Daniel noticed the change too. One evening he said, "Mom, you seem lighter these days. I was worried about you, but I think Ethan's visits have been good for you." I nodded, grateful beyond words. "He's been a blessing," I admitted. Winter came, with snow covering Denver in soft white blankets. On Christmas Eve, Ethan joined us for dinner. We decorated the tree, played board games, and shared stories late into the night. The house rang with laughter again, and for the first time since Michael's passing, I felt that the holiday spirit had truly returned. In the months that followed, I slowly began rebuilding my life. I joined a local support group for widows, started volunteering at the library, and even picked up painting again, a hobby I had abandoned years ago. Each step felt small but significant. And each time I stumbled, Ethan was there, offering quiet encouragement. There was one evening about a year after Michael's passing, when I sat on the porch watching the sunset. Ethan joined me, bringing 2 cups of tea. We sat in silence for a long time, the sky painted in shades of gold and pink. Finally, I said, I never thought I'd feel at peace again. But because of people like you, and because of Daniel, I've learned that love doesn't end when someone leaves. It changes shape, but it stays with us. He smiled warmly and nodded. Michael would be proud of you. I didn't know him well, but I can tell. You're stronger than you think. Tears filled my eyes, but this time, they weren't from grief alone. They were from gratitude, for my son, for his friend, and for the unexpected ways life gives us reasons to keep going. Years later, when I looked back on that chapter of my life, I realized that Ethan's knock on my door that rainy afternoon had been the turning point. It reminded me that even in the darkest seasons, light can find its way in. Sometimes it comes through family, sometimes through friends, and sometimes through the kindness of someone who simply shows up. That story isn't about replacing what was lost. It's about discovering that healing begins when we allow others to walk beside us. My husband's memory remains alive in my heart, and so does the lesson I learned. We don't heal in isolation. We heal in connection. And for me, that connection came when my son's friend knocked unexpectedly, carrying groceries, kindness, and the quiet gift of hope.